Maplestory the Novel, Season 1, Sacred Tears. Written by Tatsumari Korisuno. Chapter 13, Part 1. Descent. Jamal slumped in a chair beside the luxurious bed provided for him. It was nothing like the straw mats he slept on in Arentia. The previous few days had been the roughest for him. He'd been asked to relive and face the pain of losing loved ones to those monsters. Doing so would often result in his lashing out against the clerics trying to help him. In the back of his mind, he knew healing his wounded heart was their goal, but he wasn't ready to forgive them. Not yet. It had been a day since his last conversation with the clerics, which gave him enough time to steel his resolve and make them pay for the deaths they could have easily prevented. The sound of the door opening made him sit up, staring in its direction from under his brow. No sooner had the door opened than he ran to it, reaching out to grab whoever was coming in. Instead, he was hurled to the wall, supplies crashing all around him. What was that? He thought as his vision steadied. Standing before him was a man with long white hair. "Master, was that necessary?" another voice asked. The white-haired man glared, his crystal blue eyes dark with anger.
It is my understanding that you are one of a band that attacked my clerics.
The man finally asked, his jaw flexing in restraint with each word. "What is it to you? You and your sect claim to be helping us. Instead, you help the wealthy," the mercenary spat. The man stepped closer, kneeling to his level and extending a hand, but still tense.
I am Dane Altour, leader of the Aurora. We cannot be everywhere as the trained clerics are few. You might have seen some acting as an escort to the Prince of Arentia meeting with the Emperor of Usori.
Again, what are you doing to help us?
Dane wiped the spit from his face, breathing long and slow before continuing.
The failing crops have affected everyone. The Prince is securing food for Arentia in this trying time. We have escorted a merchant or two, but they were merchants of grain and meat, not luxuries.
Then why did my brother and father have to die? You have the power to protect us, to protect them, yet did nothing! Nothing! Nothing!
The words echoed hard in Dane's mind. The same words he had screamed in rage to Ariel. Dane's hand flew to the mercenary's throat, pinning him to the wall as his skin creaked under his grip. Black mist filled the air around them while a voice thrummed through Dane's mind.
Well, look at you. Succumbing to the darkness so easily.
The voice asked as two eyes appeared in the shadows surrounding him.
I have succumbed to nothing.
Dane sneered, his forearm rippling as his grip tightened.
Is that so? Then why did you latch onto this man's throat? Did he say something? Say someone's name that is dear to you?
Dane lowered his gaze away from the spectacle of the choking man before him.
No, he hasn't said her name.
What then, little mage? Why attack him like this?
The cloud asked, moving better to see his eyes before continuing with a smirk in his voice.
He reminded you of yourself all those years ago, didn't he? He reminded reminds you of how powerless Ariel was to save her.
The shadow hissed. Dane remained silent, closing his eyes and trying to block out the cloud's words as tears stung his eyes and his chest felt heavy.
That's it, isn't it? You're on the other side and you loathe what it sounds like, don't you? To have power that could save another and yet be unable to do anything to prevent what happened. How fitting, isn't it, little mage?
The shadow prodded. Dane felt its size growing behind him, pressing down on him like a weight.
You channel me through your disgust so easily while trying to appear the saintlier. Such hypocrisy will lead you nowhere.
Dane grit his teeth as he listened to this cloud, this darkness, expose his deepest hurts before him as though it were a spectacle.
I do not channel you.
Dane roared.
Is that so? Then what is this?
The shadow asked, a part of it passing over his arm, revealing veins of silver and black ooze flowing through his skin to his hand around the mercenary's throat. The strength roaring through his arm didn't feel like his own. It was brutal, primal, vile.
Master!
A voice cut through his rage, allowing Dane to regain control. As the rest of his senses came back to him, he felt the point of Viren's staff pressed to his neck and the heat of a spell blazing atop it.
Master, I beg of you, release him! I do not wish to harm you, but I will if I must!
Viren commanded. Dane fought to release his grip, letting the man drop to the ground, spitting and coughing for air.
It's all right, Viren. You can stand down.
Viren dismissed his spell, shooing those that had gathered with a stern word.
Would you rather I continue in your place, Master?
No, Viren. I will continue. Thank you for bringing me back to myself.
Dane turned his attention back to the mercenary, this time keeping his distance.
I apologize for my conduct. I was not myself. What is your name?
Dane asked. The mercenary took a minute to catch his breath, rubbing his neck where Dane's fingers had left red marks.
Jamal,
he growled, his piercing gaze blazing under his brow. Dane sighed hard, calming himself as he felt the darkness within him flare.
Who was it that gave you the ability to drain life forces?
Jamal raised his brows and shook his head.
We were given no such thing.
Some time ago, those of us that had lost family to those monsters gathered at a tavern to reminisce. As we spoke, a woman dressed in a cloak asked us about our losses. She then told us of a sect responsible for their loss, offering us the chance for revenge. She even gave us the weapons and told us that 2 of your clerics would be coming in a short time. She never gave us any magic. Dane narrowed his eyes, growling in the back of his throat.
What did this woman look like?
The man still rubbed his throat, but thought hard. She didn't take the hood from her head, but I do remember a strand of hair fell from under it. I only remember because it was the color of blood. Dane sighed in dread, slamming the door as he left.
Master,
Viren asked. Dane stormed through the halls to the kitchen.
Have Regent's mates take that man back to Artia.
He commanded flatly, gathering a small sack and packing a few loaves of bread.
It shall be done, Master. When do you plan on returning?
Viren asked. He knew that Dane would be leaving, especially now that it seemed he had an urgent matter to attend.
I shall be back by last light,
he answered, walking to Lotus and Orchid's room.
Come, we are retrieving Mars.
Dane commanded.
Do we have to? He's such a stuffy old...
Orchid, now.
Dane barked. Orchid huffed, grabbing her cloak, followed closely by Lotus as he grabbed his coat and headed out the door. The twins tried to talk to Dane, asking him meaningless questions, but Dane kept his gaze forward as he traveled outside the Forest of Peace, activating a transportation spell that took him and the twins to Arentia. Upon walking into the city, Dane was greeted by people he had helped before starting the Aurora. When asked if they had seen Mars pass through, some did remember seeing him, noting the cleric seemed to stare at something in the sky constantly. When asked which way he went, it was all Dane could do to keep his composure, as they all pointed him in one direction, due north of Arentia, to the buried city, Azwan.
Why do we have to come along anyway? He's your friend, not ours.
Lotus scoffed. Dane kept his gaze forward as they trekked through the endless billows of sand.
It is not Mars that I want your help with. A man far underground has maintained a massive power for the city. You are to rescue him. I will find Mars.
Orchid and Lotus became unsure if they wanted to help or not. But it had been some time since they had anything of interest to do, and this would be the next best thing. The trio made it to the city's front gate by sunset, where heavily armed skeletons waited.
Well, we're not getting in that way.
Orchid sighed with feigned disappointment. Dane strode forward in stoic ire. The skeletons caught sight of him, their eyes glowing white as they clattered towards him. Dane swung his staff as a wave of light obliterated the soldiers to pieces.
Find a way below the city towards that obelisk,
Dane commanded, pointing towards the spire behind him, walking deliberately through the gate and to the stairs that would lead him to the chamber of Hilda. What he could only guess to be former soldiers of Azwan rushed at him with lowered spears, blown apart by pulses of light from his staff. With each soldier that fell, Dane cursed himself for not returning to this city, and instead pursued his quest. Even if Haim had directly told him that rescuing his grandfather would have only been to bury him, it would have been better than letting him suffer. So why didn't he? What Hilda sought after was impossible to be sure, but even back then, he had the power to stop her.
You're jealous of her progress, aren't you?
A voice in his mind growled.
No, eternal life is impossible. And in the method she pursues, the life of another is only used to extend her own. She cares nothing for her fellow men.
It isn't eternal life that aggravates you. It's her lack of care. If only you could bring yourself to do that, you could advance your understanding of me more quickly. Hilda disposed of her mortal shackles and advanced her quest by decades.
I will not lower myself to think that way.
You deceive yourself, little mage. The freedom is inviting, and you are not immune to its lure.
Dane swung his staff hard behind him, finding no one. Was he tempted? Did he want to toss aside his morals and pursue the darkness with abandon? Shaking his head, he stilled his mind and pushed through the doors where a small battalion of skeleton soldiers waited. Dane swung his staff, the skeletons broken across the floor, revealing Hilda lounging in her chair. Her eyes had become darker and more sinister, but she was still as attractive as he remembered.
White mage. I'm glad you could make it.
Hilda smirked with a magnetic tone. Dane's face remained flat as he entered the room, bones sweeping aside from his path as power billowed around him.
Where is Mars?
He demanded, walking to the center of the room and setting down his staff with a soft, metallic click.
Who?
Mars. The man who came here following the life force of my clerics. Where is he?
Dane's eyes darkened. His hair caught in a draft around him.
Oh, him. I put him in charge of maintaining the power of the obelisk. Here's the life of those clerics of yours. They were strong. I almost look like my teenage self again.
Hilda smiled, holding up a small vial of pink liquid.
Your murderous quest ends here, Hilda.
Dane thundered. Hilda threw her head back with a faked laugh.
What a lark. You tried and failed to stop my murderous quest once already. Yet, after all our little skirmishes, never returned to complete your task. Only when your clerics die by my hand do you decide to stop me?